Shalom. Shalom. My name is Yair Davidiy. I'm speaking to you from the land of Israel. And we are now about to discuss an important point concerning the ancient Celtic peoples, the so-called Celtic peoples who were once the majority population in the British Isles, in Ireland, in Scotland, in England, in Wales. They all had the Celtic civilization. They are referred to as Celts. We also find Celts in Western Europe, in what is now France, was then known as Gaul. Also in Holland and in the north and then further eastward, also part of Germany before the present day Germans, or before the German speaking tribes came there. That was also Celtic, especially the south and the southern areas. Also extending into Italy and extending into Spain, we also had Celtic tribes, or tribes of Celtic civilization, who were influenced by Celtic culture and Celtic language. And we find amongst these peoples, we find evidence of Hebrews, of Israelites having been present amongst them. And this evidence is especially strong in the West, in the British Isles, in Ireland, in Britain, and also in Gaul, but it's present everywhere that there was an Israelite Hebrew element amongst the Celts. And we were shown in the previous talk how the Celts called themselves Hebrews, Iberi, or Hiberi. That was the name the Celts, especially at least the ones in the West, gave to themselves, and this is another form of the word Ibri, or Ha-Ibri, Iberi, meaning Hebrew, in the Hebrew language. And this is how the name was pronounced in Western areas, and also amongst the Northern Israelites as Iberi or Iberi. And this is the name they referred to themselves as, and the name that they were known as. The term Celtic is more a mod. It was used in Roman times, but it was an innovation of the Romans, one could say, a mistake on their part. It wasn't actually a name that the Celts applied to themselves. The Celts called themselves, as far as we can ascertain, they called themselves Hebrew, Iberi, or at the least they used this name as pertaining to themselves. It was characteristic of them. So that, and we've given a whole talk on this, which is very successful. It is probably the most successful talk we have given, and we have an article about this. So we're moving on to the next topic, but this is also connected to what we are speaking about. There were Celtic, amongst the Celts, who were Hebrew place names, Hebrew ethnic names, and there are indications, strong indications, that Israelites were amongst the Celtic people. Doesn't mean that all the so-called Celtic people were Hebrews, but the Hebrews were there. That is the bottom line. That is a big starting point. That is the thing. That is what we are trying to ascertain. Ascertain, not only to ascertain, to affirm, to establish, to have it accepted and have it known about, and to give the proof of this point, of this major factor. As a starting point, Hebrews were in the West. They were part of the Celtic civilizations, and they were an important factor there. And once we have this point accepted, affirmed, then we can keep going. We can say what percentage of the population were they, how did they get there, and so on. All different other questions, but the first point is that the Hebrews were in that area. And we have it. We have it, we have explanations, we have whole books, we have written books. Other people have written books, articles, video talks, explaining how those 10 tribes moved from the east from the land of Israel to the west. The 10 tribes were part of the Hebrew nation. They were part of the 12 tribes of Israel. They divided, they split apart the two parts of the kingdom of Israel, divided into two different sections. The 10 tribes were in the north. They were the majority. They were taken into exile by the Assyrians. They lost consciousness of their ancestry, and they were taken, in part, most of them were taken overland to the north. A portion also taken by sea by Phoenicians and Philistines in ships to the west. Those who went to the north, to the region of Armenia, Caucasus Mountains, western Iran, and so on, then from there too they moved northwards into southern Russia, and in the course of several centuries, in different waves and different bodies, they also moved to the west, and they congregated in western areas, and from both directions they converged on the region that later, from which Celtic civilization later emerged, and they were amongst the peoples there. And we can explain this and show it and prove it, etc. But even if someone does not accept what we are saying on this point, it is a secondary point, it is a secondary consideration. The main point is that the Israelites were in the West. They got there. How they got there is another question, but they were there. For instance, as an analogy, for an example, so we have someone called Joe Smith. One day he's in New York. Joe Smith in New York, walking around town. Here the indications that he's leaving soon. We don't know. One day he disappears. And we hire a private detective, and the private detective goes around and checks everything up, and he finds different proofs, pieces of evidence showing that Joe Smith got on a certain flight. He was booked, he got on a flight, and he flew to London, and he should be in London. And this private detective brings us a lot of evidence, a lot of proofs about it. But not everyone is accepting, or not everyone agrees with what he's saying. There's something that doesn't sound right, or they can't accept it. They disagree with him. And later we find evidence that Joe Smith is indeed in London. We hear that Joe Smith is in London. We have proof that Joe Smith is in London, very strong proof that Joe Smith is there. So the main point is whether or not these reports of Joe Smith being in London are correct or not. How he got there, whether the private detective was right or wrong, whether he flew on that specific flight that the private detective said he did, or whether he got there in some other way on another flight, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's worth knowing, maybe, but it's a secondary consideration. So now we're talking about proof that lost in tribes were to be found in the West, found amongst Western peoples, especially amongst the Celts, the so-called Celtic peoples. And the Bible tells us that in the end times, in our times, the 10 tribes would be in that region. There are numerous proofs in the Bible. The Bible tells us that the 10 tribes, wherever they would be possessors of the gates of their enemies, of the gates of those who helped them, of the strategic thoroughfares and passes, as the British Empire first was, and now America is. And this is part of their overseas and foreign policy considerations of their whole operations in the international arena, one could say. This is what characterizes them, and this is what was prophesied about them. It also said that they would be immensely wealthy on a world scale. They would be the military most powerful nations in the earth, as they are or were or always have been to some degree or other. It also says that they would possess mineral resources. They would be enormously multitudinous. There would be a great number of people of them on the world scale. There would be an ethnic group on their own in the world population, as these people are. That they would be at the ends of the earth, as these people are located when you take the land of Israel as the center of the earth. And that they would have a major center in the Atlantic Ocean area. That they would also be in the Isles of the Sea, and so on, and other more and more of this. We have a lot of proofs from the Bible, so this is also worth remembering.